Syria. One of them shows how the tribes are supplying oil and gas to the government and the rebels to spare their villages and make money. As the Syrian regime has crumbled, society in the Syrian desert, east and north of Syria, has fallen back to the tribes. Each tribe now is claiming ownership of the fields that lie in its tribal territory. Abu Zaid, who appears in this photo here, we see in this photo, says in an interview with the Guardian, once we have the economic power from selling the gas and the oil, we can convene a council for the tribes here inside the country and organize all the military units in one military council. Even Al-Qaeda affiliated groups cannot do anything against us, says Abu Zaid. Even the Americans cannot take these fields from us with the weapons we have now. The Arab region is witnessing movements, uprising, and revolutions that include major political changes related to the nature of the state and the nature of the political society. Despite these changes, the tribal factor has not been absent from the political scene, taking dangerous roles, as we have seen in the example before. So, many people are still struggling with definition of tribe. So first, I'll just look at the definition of tribe, what a tribe means now. Many in the Western world think of tribal people as nomads, riding camels and living in harsh and remote desert areas. This is not the reality of Middle Eastern tribes, where the distinction between tribal and non-tribal does not correspond in any significant way between nomadic and settled populations. The majority of Middle Eastern tribes don't move. Tribal population, for instance, in Iraq and Syria, are settled farmers who plant fruits and trees. Yet tribal identity in the region is still alive in the socio-political consciousness of millions of people residing in modern cities. For the sake of simplicity here, I will refer to tribe as a localized group in which kinship is the dominant idiom of organization, and whose members consider themselves culturally distinct in terms of customs, dialect, language, and origins. Here, we have a map of the tribes, just Arab tribes. Mainly in my research, I'm looking at the Arab tribes. I'm not looking at the Kurdish tribe. I'm looking at the Arab Sunni tribes as residing within the Badia, or the Badia, which constitute 55% of Syria total area. So here, we see the tribal distribution in Syria over the map. Arab tribes in Syria have always maintained their culture, solidarity, local leadership, and considerable control over their internal affairs. However, since 1950s, new challenges have emerged that threaten tribal structure and their traditional way of life. After the arrival of Abdel Nasser to power in 1985, the government became more effective, and its economic and military power increased. The Bedouin were subjected to various forms of interference by the government. Ideology was an important tool to justify state policies toward the tribes. Tribalism was considered by the socialists as one of the major ills of the past. Bedouin loyalties were linked to their kinship system rather than to the state. Bedouin have been looked upon by the Nasserists and later by the Ba'athists in 1963 as an embarrassment in the contemporary world. Based on that ideology, measures had been taken by the state to eradicate tribalism and nomadism. Much land that had been granted by the French and the Ottoman to the tribal leaders had been confiscated by the state. The state sought to integrate the Bedouin into the rest of the population and attempted to break tribal power and extend state control in the Syrian steppe by abolishing their traditional grazing system and by abolishing their customary law system, which is in Arabic called al-Arb. So we have effective state control until 1970. Hafez al-Assad comes to power. What happens? In 1970, Hafez al-Assad arrived to power and wanted to broaden the support base of his new regime. Although tribalism was considered by the Ba'ath Party as one of the major ills of the past era, Hafez al-Assad showed an unusual degree of flexibility in his policies with the tribes. He chose a strategy in authoritarian fashion based on creating a system of clientelism between his regime and influential tribal sheikhs. His strategy was to co-opt tribal leaders and employ them as tools for indirect rule through the use of appointments and subsidies. Here we have a map of Syria. My colleague Dara talked before about the Kurds. Hafez al-Assad used the tribes to counter the balance of the Kurdish population in the northeast part of the country. In 1973, Hafiz al-Assad's regime started implementing a project called the Arab Belt Project. Thousands of people, mainly from Bushaban tribe, who lost their villages in Al-Raqqa Governorate due to the construction of Euphrates Dam. We could see probably up here to the north, when the government established the Euphrates Dam, many of the tribes have lost their villages here. So the project was to move the tribes into the northeast to Arabize the region and change the demographic situation of the region, of the Kurdish region. So, second, with the Syrian regime as well, Hafiz al-Assad faced growing opposition from the Muslim Brotherhood in major cities. The Syrian regime needed to counterweight the urban-based power groups by supporting the base among rural populations, including the Bedouin tribes in the Syrian Badia. Hafiz al-Assad used his patronage network with the tribes and unleashed their power to check the Islamists. Despite the slogans of the Syrian regime of no sectarianism and no tribalism, the Syrian regime did not hesitate to seek the aid of the tribes to suppress Hama uprising led by the Muslim Brotherhood in 1982. The regime called upon the assistance of the tribes, particularly the Hadidiyin tribe in the countryside of Hama, to check upon the flow of guns and arms coming from the Iraqi regime at that time to the Muslim Brotherhood. Tribes were seen very loyal to Hafiz al-Assad, especially in his battle against the Muslim Brotherhood. Therefore, in 1982, tribal representation in the Syrian parliament increased from 7% to 12%. Bedouin have started to emerge in important positions in the Ministry of Interior, the Ministry of Agriculture, and certain branches of the security apparatus. What happened during Bashar as well? Policies towards the tribes undertaken by Bashar al-Assad from 2000 until 2010 were not different at all from the policies carried out during his father's rule. Bashar has taken the government's relationship with the tribes a step further by promoting more Bedouin to prominence within the regime. I mean, up till now, the vice president of the regime, of the Ba'ath Party affairs, is of Bedouin origin, and he comes from Palmyra, which is my hometown. Moreover, in a similar way to Hama uprising in 1982, Bashar al-Assad used his networks of clans from the Bedouin tribes who had been encouraged to settle down in the Kurdish areas to suppress the Kurdish uprising in 2004. But why did the tribes revolt against Assad the son? As we could see in the other photo here, we could see how the Bedouin have been marginalized during the Bashar's time. The wider popular base of the Syrian society to which the Bedouin in the Badia and the farmers in the countryside belong have been marginalized and impoverished. The overconcentration, and here I'm using my supervisor's words, Raymond Hennebusch, the overconcentration of power and patronage in the ruling clan has weakened the clientelist networks that connected the regime to the society. Hafiz al-Assad, when he came to power in 1970, he depended on the farmers, he depended on the countryside, he depended on the Bedouin to rule. But what happened when Bashar came to rule is that the countryside, including the Badi where the Bedouins are, have been marginalized. And most of the development projects were taking place in the big cities, mainly in Damascus and Aleppo. In 2004, 2005, 5 million people were living under poverty line, with 2 million Syrians unable to meet their basic needs. This sparked the Syrian uprising in the predominantly tribal area in Daraa. The central element in tribal formation is the establishment of kinship group. Each member of the group is responsible for each and every other member of other group, and the group acts are called collective action. When attacked, group members are obliged to unite to defend themselves. When members sustain injury or loss, group members unite to gain compensation or seek vengeance. When applying these dynamics to Daraa, which is a predominantly tribal area where the uprising started, I would argue that the Syrian uprising started as a collective behavior. The word faza in Arabic, I mean, it has been used a lot if you go back to the videos of the Syrian uprising in the first days when the Syrian security forces used to shoot at protesters. They used to say the word faza a lot, mainly in Daraa and Homs as well. The word faza, which means in Arab, I mean, it's a tribal word, which means taking up of arms in defense of a martyred relative or honorable individual, has been used a lot in Daraa early protest and is believed to be a motivator for protesters from other tribes in Homs and Hama and Deir ez-Zor. Therefore, Friday of the Tribes is held in recognition of the tribes participating in a protest against the Syrian regime. We know during the protest movement, each Friday had a name. I mean, The coordinators committees used to give a name to each Friday, and one of the Fridays in the early months of the protest was the Friday of Tribes. The repression and torture exercised by the Syrian security forces pushed the revolution towards collective violence. The armed violence, which came as a response to the regime's violence, corresponds with the concept of intiqam, which means in Arabic revenge for real perceived offenses committed against one's kin. Members of the Arab tribes in Syria are bound by honor to take vengeance upon the aggressor, which is in this case are the Syrian security forces, which are deemed to be hostile towards the members of the tribe. I'm looking here mainly at how the regime uses tribal leaders to guarantee peace in certain areas and prevent the protest from. On 18 July 2012, after Defense Minister Dawood Rajha was assassinated in a bombing in Damascus, Fahd Jassim al-Faraj was appointed by Bashar al-Assad as his successor. It has been overlooked that al-Assad appointed a Sunni Muslim with a tribal background at such a crucial point in the conflict. Another question that comes to mind is what made Mohammed Saeed al-Khaitan and many other officials with Sunni tribal backgrounds so loyal to the regime so far? And why is it that army officers with famous tribal backgrounds have not been depicted? I mean, here I'm not sure if it's clear to you, but there's a diagram of Bashar al-Assad here. And then at the top we have the Syrian Minister of Defense, who has a tribal background. And then we have here on the right the current Vice President of Syria of the tribal background. And then we have here two famous Syrian officials who depicted with a tribal background who depicted from Assad's regime. Over the last few decades, Fahd Jassim al-Faraj, Mohammed Saeed al-Khaitan, and many other tribal leaders across the country helped to establish the regime legitimacy and ensure stability. During the first months of the uprising, these tribal leaders had managed to keep consistent relationship between the state and the communities in which they had influence. In the early months of the uprising, many tribal leaders, especially in Al-Hasaka governorate, actively opposed the protest to protect their tribes and the clans from the regime retribution. We started to witness a phenomena during the Syrian uprising, which is tribal gatherings. Tribal gatherings have emerged following the Syrian uprising. The regime has been trying to win the hearts and the minds of the tribes. The regime started periodically holding tribal conferences in Homs, Hama, Raqqa, in which sheikhs were asked to issue statements of loyalty and a pledge of support to Bashar al-Assad. They were asked in front of the state media to encourage their tribesmen to refuse joining the rebels and to condemn Western and the Arabian Gulf conspiracy. That's what they call it. The loyal tribes attending these conferences have announced the establishment of the Syrian and Arab Tribes Clans Forum. Tribal sheikhs were also asked to meet the Russian ambassador, Russia, the big supporter of the Syrian regime, and to present him with gifts after Russia's vetoes in the Security Council. Syrian state media presented these tribal sheikhs as symbols of Syrian solidarity and patriotism. On the other hand, the first tribal gatherings, we could see here the Syrian Arab Tribes Council, which has been set up by the opposition. So we could see that both of the opposition and the regime have been competing to gain the support of the tribes. The first tribal gathering against the regime was held in the Jordanian city of Al-Mafraq in 2012. More than 250 people from different tribal confederations like Bahnaza, Shumar, and Baggara, which are the names of tribes, attended the meeting. They confirmed in their meeting that the uprising was based on the tribes and asked the Syrian National Council at that time, which was the main opposition body at that time, for a representation that equals their weight in the Syrian uprising. Syrian tribal leaders started holding gatherings, conferences in different countries, in Egypt, in Jordan, in Turkey, with the aim of unifying and proliferating the legacy of the tribe. Here I'm looking at what I call tribal crescent versus the Shiite crescent. The majority of the largest Syrian tribal groups are branches of a confederated system, which is called Qabila, that extend to the Arabian Gulf countries. The shared kinship ties possessed by the Syrian tribes and their relatives in the Arab Gulf countries presented a regional geopolitical complication to the Syrian uprising. As soon as the uprising started in Dar'a and after the bloody crackdown against the peaceful protesters, the tribes in Daraa contacted their relatives, their cousins, and we would say in Arabic, in the Gulf, asking for a firm diplomatic and economic position regarding Damascus. When the Arab tribes in Syria made appeals for protection from the brutality of Assad regime, their tribal kinsmen in the Gulf states of Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and Kuwait have a hard time ignoring them. Indeed, substantial assistance at the beginning of the uprising, consisting mainly of food and medical supplies, continue until now. Anti-Assad regime states such as Saudi Arabia and Qatar are reported to be using tribal networks to move material and weapons into Syria, although they deny this officially. The tribal connections have ignited sympathies among thousands of Saudis, Kuwaitis, and Qataris who have donated millions of dollars in aid and recently military equipment to the Free Syrian Army. I mean, here I am having a map of what the Gulf, I mean, mainly what the Arabian Gulf are talking about, which is the Shiite crescent, which extended from Iran, and now they are saying that Iraq is under the Iranian control. Lebanon, in a way or another, is under Iran control through supporting Hezbollah. So now the battle is going over Syria. If Iran takes over Syria, then we will have an Iranian influence extending from Iran all the way to the Mediterranean. So what Saudi Arabia is trying to do is trying to use tribal bonds to break the Shiite crescent. So that's what I call tribal crescent versus the Shiite crescent. Much has been said about the Gulf interest in regime change in Syria to steer Damascus away from Tehran and support the regional standing. Saudi Arabia is troubled by the Shiite crescent that extends from Iran through Iraq and Syria and to the Mediterranean shores of Lebanon. The uprising in Syria created an opportunity for Saudi Arabia to use tribal bonds to destroy the Syrian regime. If the tribal links are harnessed, the Gulf states' influence will extend from the north of Syria to western Iraq and Jordan, creating a tribal crescent in place of Iran's Shiite crescent. I'm not sure if you know this person, if he's familiar to you, if you are dealing with what is happening in Syria. I mean, he's been on the media a lot. This is Ahmed Jarba, who is the head of the National Coalition of the Syrian Revolutionary and Opposition Forces. He belongs to Shammar tribe. Actually, he has a Saudi passport, by the way. Many of the tribes in Syria, many of the tribesmen in Syria have Kuwaiti or Saudi or Qatari passports because they have tribal connections. They belong to the same tribe. And in the 1950s and 60s, when the socialists came to power, many of them immigrated to the Gulf region with the oil boom, and I mean, they were allowed to have Arabian Gulf passports. He is believed to maintain close tribal ties, Ahmed Jarba, to Saudi Arabia, who have played a major role in supporting him, actually, to be the head of the opposition forces. I mean, here we see him in his tribal dress, and here we see him in the suit. I mean, the tribal, now looking at the tribal effect over the borders of Iraq. The Syrian desert stretches into Iraq. Tribal ties also extend beyond the border, making eastern Syria and western Iraq united. Among the most prominent of these groups with the tribal ties are La Nuzar, Shammar, La Ghidat, and Jabour. The financial and the diplomatic support that the Iraqi government is providing to the Syrian regime is considered by the Arab tribes in Iraq, which belong to the Sunni sect, as being based on sectarian motives. So now the tribes in Iraq are fighting their supporting their fellow tribesmen in Syria. As the fighting between the Syrian regime forces and the armed opposition has spilled across the Iraqi borders, the tribes in Iraq have joined their fellow Syrians in the battles that took place there. More than 40 Syrian soldiers who had tried to escape from Iraq from the rebel fighters along the borders were killed in an attack by the Iraqi tribes. Tribal identity. Now, I mean, as things have developed into a civil war, tribal identity is used in different areas of Syria to mobilize and direct the armed activities of tribesmen in support of both the government and the opposition. Many tribes have established tribal militias now, whether in supporting the regime or the opposition, or this is part of my paper about the role of the tribes in the Syrian uprising, where I'm trying to have a tribal map of all the tribes and their stance from the Syrian opposition or the regime. So some tribes are loyal to the regime. I used here different words. Some tribes are opposition and some tribes are split, fighting with the regime. Some tribes are fighting. And then some of them are silent, have decided to do nothing. Now, and this is what I am working on during the time I am here at the secular ideology in the Middle East, which is the relationship between the tribes and the Islamists. Today, certain tribes in rebel-held areas are fighting with Islamist groups, mainly with the Islamic State of Iraq and Levant and Jabhat al-Nusra. This alliance between the tribes and the Islamists in the Syrian civil war was not formed because both are conservative Sunni Muslims. Rather, it's an alliance that is based on interest, owing to the dynamic and the pragmatic nature of the tribes' quest for survival and prosperity. This alliance is done to prevent Kurdish autonomy and to share the spoils of war plunder, mainly oil fields. Now we know in the eastern part of Syria there is a big war or a big battle taking place over oil fields, and the tribes are playing a major role in this. So they side with who they see that they have interests with, who can provide them a share out of those oil fields. What is, as well, these Islamist groups are trying to do in the eastern part of Syria, they have learned from their experience in Iraq. You know, after the American invasion of Iraq in 2003, the Americans have co-opted the tribes and used them to fight Al-Qaeda. And apparently Al-Qaeda now knows that these tribes could be used against us, so we need to co-opt them. So that's why recently there have been many attempts from these Islamists to distribute aid to them, food, probably as well try to include them in the military operations. So, conclusions. Tribes in the eastern and southern part of Syria and northern part of Syria as well are one of the major forces behind the uprising against the Syrian regime. Tribes that were marginalized by Assad regime and the tribal elites whom their interests clash with the interests of Assad's immediate family constitute major military and financial resources for supplying and complicating the Syrian civil war. The stubborn persistence of tribal identity in Syria is the outcome of the failure of national projects of political modernization and restoring to politics of survival, even if survival strategies mean radical shifts in posture and policy. Thank you for listening.